So I kind of like that I could just use my palm and smack this thing. I really like to punish my guitars. I think I need to seek help. All right, everyone, I'm finally going to do my guitar collection video series, and I had to break it up because I started to, do some math, and I realized that it's going to be a long video if I try to cram all of them into one. So I think I'm going to do 5 or 6 different episodes, but each one's going to include about 5 to 6 guitars. At first, I did not want to do this because it feels kind of braggy, kind of like, look at all my guitars, but a lot of people have said that they'd be interested to see what I have, and I think it's really cool that when I started to collect them, it was because, first of all, I've always wanted to have more than 1 or 2 guitars. When I was younger, all I could do to get the next guitar was to trade in the one I currently had because I was so broke. And so that was usually how I got my next guitar. So it was just mind-blowing when I realized I could buy a special guitar for, say, like a certain video that I was doing. I didn't want to do an Angus Young video using a Strat because that's all I had for a long time. So I thought, you know what? I can go out and buy an SG now. Let's do it. And that kept happening for different artists. And I thought it was a really fun excuse to have to buy a different kind of guitar. Just a quick heads up, this series is not going to be super specific to details as far as all the specs of each guitar. I'm not going to be telling you all the different sizes of the necks and every single type of pickup. But what I want to do is make it more of a personal approach and say, this is why I love this guitar, this is why I bought it, and now these are the things I don't like about it, and so on. So these are in no particular order. It just happens to start off with a really cool guitar though. And that is the Gibson Explorer that I always wanted ever since I saw the one video by Metallica. This guitar is pretty insane. Everyone who plays it or works on it, like my luthier, they all say they want one now. I think you're going to see why after I demonstrate on it, but this is going to be the clean sound. So I'm going into a jazz chorus right now. So speaking of one, or like Sanitarium. The clean sounds are epic on this guitar. One time we had a Sanctus reunion, my old teenage metal band, and I had Al play this guitar, and when he went into clean sound, it just filled the stage, the tone. It's surprisingly lightweight. The first time it arrived, I thought, man, this thing is going to be insane because it was in the huge case and it felt like it weighed like 30 pounds. And then I opened it up and this thing just is way lighter than I expected. And of course, I use it for all my Metallica videos now. Sadly, I only used it live one time. My friend Al has actually played this live more than I have. That's kind of funny. By the way, I am switching between amps. So I have my jazz chorus for the clean, and then I have my Engel for most of the distortions. Just like the clean tone, the distorted tones are huge on this thing. I mean, this is one of the thickest sounding guitars that I have. I'm going to get it modified coming up because one thing I don't really like about it is that the knobs make sense, which sounds stupid. But what I mean by that is that this volume knob right here controls the front pickup, the neck pickup. And then this one controls the bridge pickup. But I almost always play on the bridge pickup. So I'm tempted to always turn this volume knob, the one that's closest to the front, when I have to turn this one. And it feels weird to have to like go in between knobs and do that. So what I'm going to have my friend do is just exchange them so that this becomes the bridge pickups volume pot. And then we have a tone back here that I just kind of leave all the way up most of the time. Another strange thing about an Explorer shape that I'm not used to because I'd never had an Explorer before. It's reaching way up here for the toggle switch. It feels strange. You're playing all of a sudden, it's like way over there. And if you got to do something really quick, it's tough to do. It's a stupid gripe, but it's just something I had to get used to the feel of. Standing and playing this thing is awesome. The guitar is really well balanced, and like I said before, it's pretty lightweight. The only thing is when I sit down to play, this huge chunk of the guitar does, feel a little bit awkward on my forearm. And then, of course, like a lot of my guitars, I put a decal on this one, and this is the Donnie Darko Rabbit. And I have 2 other guitars that have that as well. You have to hear the neck pickup on this thing. When I play leads on it, I can't believe how easy it is to shred on this thing. I'll do a little Nothing Else Matters solo, but I'll do a little bit of the bridge and then the neck pickup so you could hear how crazy the difference is. So bridge pickup. Neck pickup. It's about as creamy a tone as the body color, I would say. Yep, it passes the Sweet Child of Mine test. Okay, so that is my Gibson USA 70s Model Explorer. That's a mouthful. This is one of my dream guitars. There's such a funny backstory of how I ended up with this. This is actually my old guitar teacher's guitar. And this is the very one that when I first took lessons, he was my very first guitar teacher. I used to just sit there and drool at this thing. I had seen Steve Vai with his guitar in a few ads before, and I really thought it was an incredible looking guitar, and I couldn't get over the fact that everything on it was customized for 7. So you have the 7 magnets on the pickups, obviously 7 strings. You have 7 tuning pegs, and so you have to have the elongated headstock, which I think looks really badass. On the locking nuts, you have to have this customized middle section that includes 3 strings instead of 2. So it's kind of strange. If you look, there's going to be 4 actual Allen wrench screws that you have to deal with when you're tuning. Luckily, this thing stays in great tune. It's one of the OG early 90s ones, so it's the real deal. And then the bridge, of course, has to be massive in order to, house the 7 strings. So I just think this all looks really cool. Not to mention, one of my favorite bands early on was Overkill, and their colors were black and this neon green color. I recently did a Korn video with this thing, and people kept talking about how accurate the tone was to Korn. And so this thing going into my Engel just sounds huge. Just a massive tone. The first time I played a 7 string, I got chills just because of how the frequencies hit you. Speaking of my first guitar teacher that owned this thing and eventually sold it to me after like 3 decades, we're actually going to be doing a podcast next week. And so we're going to really talk about the backstory about this guitar. So keep an eye out for that. I wonder what Pantera would have sounded like on a 7 string. One person should not be able to wield this much power. Okay, let's move on. It was a long time ago now, but I knew I always wanted a guitar with this kind of shape. I didn't care if it was the Jaguar or the Jazzmaster. I just knew I wanted something that had sort of this surf look. And at the time, it was like the hip guitar to have. There's a lot of great guitar players that play this guitar. The first one I think I saw was Nels Cline was playing one of these. I believe he had a black one with white pickups, and it looks so sweet. The first time I got to play one of these was on stage, and it was somebody else's Jazzmaster, my friend Jake. And it was a big deal that he had one of these. And I remember asking him, hey, can I just play it for this one song? He's like, sure, man, just, be careful with it or whatever. And we played I Ran by Flock of Seagulls. It was a lot of fun. I was playing bass that night, so I was just jumping on guitar for the one song. Anyway, halfway through the solo, the strap came off and I almost dropped his guitar on stage in front of an entire audience and him. He probably would have kicked my ass, so I'm glad it didn't hit the floor. I caught it just in time. But after playing it, it felt so comfortable on my arms that I knew I wanted to eventually get one. It's not just an aesthetic thing either. This thing plays and sounds awesome. I used it in my Beatles Techniques video, and I was able to capture a lot of that old vintage sound. Whenever I need the vintage sound, I go to this guitar for the most part. It's probably, besides my Jaguar, the most comfortable guitar to sit and play. So right now, this is great. See how balanced it is? But if you play it like this, you could fall asleep with it in your arms. I think when I'm like 80 or 90 and I just want to sit around and play jazz, I'm just going to use the Jazzmaster and sit in my wheelchair and just, rock out at the nursing home. The tone of this thing is very extreme, and by that I mean that the upper end of it can just cut your head off. Through the jazz chorus, it's not nearly as twangy as it was before, but in my other amp, it could get a little bit too top-endy. Let's put the toggle switch in the middle, so we're going to be using both pickups now. This is my favorite sound. It's hard to explain, but it's like a hollow brightness that still has a lot of fullness to it. Just something magical about that. Whoever had this last did a great job of really souping this thing up. So there's this compensated nut. I think it's made out of bone. It stays in perfect tuning. It does have those kind of goofy rotating lock tuners, but I don't really have to change the strings on this thing very much. But when I do, it's kind of a headache because I have to refigure out how to do it. The bridge, though, this is where you put a lot of effort into it. There's this buzz stop, they call it, I believe. I know that everyone who plays this goes, oh, it's good that you have one of these. The only thing you can't do is that really cool harp effect, you know, when you don't have the buzz stop. But without the buzz stop, you get some really cool sounds. I think Nils Cline takes advantage of that quite a bit. One thing I don't like, maybe I just haven't figured it out yet, but the trem bar just comes right out like that. I think the newer models, it pops in and locks, pops and locks. But this one, you just gotta hope that it doesn't fall out. I played on stage once with this thing before, and I leaned over to grab something, and this thing just fell right out. So this thing stays in tune even if I use it a lot. So if I'm doing something like... little Chris Isaak there. Okay, let's check it. Perfect tuning. I'll play a little with distortion, but I usually don't use too much with this guitar anyway. How about the front pickup? I like to give all front pickups the slash test, I guess. But yeah, this thing sounds great, but there's so much buzz, you know. Like I said, I don't really use this thing for distortion too much. All right, let's move on. I feel so bad for this guitar because I think I beat it up more than any of my other guitars. What I mean by that is it's so dependable, so reliable that I'm not really too gentle with it. You know, I'll pick it up by the monkey grip and kind of, you know, throw it around a little bit. I'll go crazy with the trem bar. I'll play it real rough, and it just keeps working for me. It keeps staying in tune. It keeps sounding great. This thing spoils me. This is one of my most beautiful guitars, I would say, as far as in the gaudy department, where it gets a little too over the top sometimes. It's white and gold, and you got the vines going all the way down the neck. It just reminds me of just this, like, 80s soap opera gaudiness. I can't really describe it any other way. The headstock blows me away every time I see it. It's just that gold Ibanez logo on top of a white headstock, and I always love the way the Ibanez headstocks look. One day I walked into Guitar Center and this was hanging up in the used section. I could not believe it. So I went over to the wall and I just looked up at it, and it was like shining down on me. And I took it off from the wall and I just kind of held it and stared at it for a while. Like, I can't believe this is real. Now, even though I really love the vine pattern on the neck, at first it was hard to get used to. You know, you do have the dots at the top here, which help out, but when you're under stage lights or even intense lights in the studio, sometimes it can reflect in a way and confuse you because there is something on every fret. It's easy to look down and just get overwhelmed with the visual stimulation happening here. It's too bad I don't play this thing live more often because this guitar is made for concerts. Just the way the output is angled. It's upward like a lot of Ibanez's are, and so when you have it behind your strap, it goes perfectly down into the guitar. But when I'm sitting and playing, it looks silly because now the cable's going upward, which is kind of strange. That was wild. That's another thing about this guitar. With these pickups, and if you have it in the right setting as far as gain goes, I get a lot of surprise squeals out of this thing, like what just happened. So I always feel like I'm in attack mode when I play this thing. Even though I want to just chill and play some really smooth lines, it just feels like I just go off on this thing. I had my friend Mike set this up a long time ago, and even though it's been through brutal Minnesota winters and really hot summers, this thing is still very much set up perfectly. It's really hard to throw this thing off. See, it keeps surprising me. You probably noticed the bite of the guitar. These pickups just have that sheen at the top. But it's not too much. Sometimes, like the Jazzmaster can be too much. This thing is just enough to cut through the mix when it needs to. But of course, if you go to the front pickup, you get some of the thickest sounds as well. Even though this thing is very angelic, if you will, it could still get very down and dirty. I'll leave it at that. The decal on this one is just the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. So we have the cat and Alice right there. And at first I didn't like it because I put it in the wrong spot, but it's really the only spot it would fit. But sometimes it would like rub against my forearm. But now that it's kind of worked in, it doesn't do that anymore. Maybe someday I'll get it permanently put in there. And I showed the back of this when I did the review of this guitar, but I love the way the back of the neck looks. It has the layered lines through the wood. I also really love the rounded joint right here. So when you're playing way up high, you don't feel anything fighting against you. Like I said, this thing just spoils me. So that's why it ends up in probably my top 3 guitars that I would save if there was a fire. I'd run in and this thing would just be like one of the first ones I would grab. Okay, moving on. This poor guitar just sitting in the back there, waiting its turn. So this is my workhorse guitar. It's one of the first guitars I picked up because my YouTube channel started taking off, and I wanted to do a Tony Iommi video and some Angus Young like I talked about earlier, and this was the one I went with. It's a 2012. It's like a Guitar Center special anniversary guitar or something like that. You could tell I'm pretty bad with details when it comes to guitars, but I know what I like about it. This is another really lightweight guitar, and at first I was really worried that it was going to have severe neck dive. But when I set it on my lap, it's pretty balanced. I have to go pretty far for it to finally want to fall forward, so this thing is balanced really well. The neck is my favorite part though. This feels so easy to play. I use it for all my Heart tribute band gigs for all the 70s stuff. I recently brought this into my friend Mike to get it set up and fixed up because I'm going to be playing a lot of shows, I guess, coming up this summer. And he was surprised by a lot of things. He was like, wow, where did you get this SG? There's a lot of interesting things about it. For example, both of the volume pots pull out. You get a coil split, which can be great in certain circumstances. It's going to add a lot of buzz today. But if I leave it in humbucker mode here, you get... If I pull it out, you can hear the buzz kick in, but you can also hear it splitting. That could be so awesome if you're in the middle of a solo and you want to get a little bit more attack. And it feels so cool if you're getting that buzz to just push down and hear a click and all of a sudden the buzz is gone. So you go from this to that. Of course, the neck pickup is as thick as you ever want it to be. Sorry, I have to play riffs in short bursts because of copyright, especially with anything related to Ozzy. Let's give it the Sweet Child of Mine test, shall we? Hate it when that happens, when you turn one of the volumes down, then you switch over and it's just dead. That happened to me on stage one time during that solo, actually, during Barracuda. This guitar makes life so much easier on stage because, you know, I've played Les Pauls on stage before, and reaching to those higher frets could be a huge bummer. Speaking of Heart, when you're playing on a Les Paul with Heart, you have to reach a lot of high frets. So there's one solo in particular where you're like... On the Les Paul, that's almost impossible to do, but on the SG, it's right there. It's almost like playing the 15th fret of a Les Paul, but here it's the 22nd fret. Some people love the zebra pickups, you know, the way it looks, the white and the black, but I don't really care for it too much. I mean, it does differentiate it a little bit from other SGs, but I'm really a big fan of just the big humbucker cover, you know, the silver covers. I think that looks a little bit cooler. So someday I might modify this to look more like that. And a lot of people ask about this bridge. It's kind of strange looking, isn't it? This is called a Duesenberg Les Trem 2. And when I first put it on, I just wanted some sort of Bigsby-like bridge so that I could do a little bit of trem work. But it didn't work out because after my first show, the bar fell off and with it came out 3, I think, Allen wrench screws. I thought, man, if that's going to hold everything together, I just don't feel confident in that. So I just kept the bar off of it. So what I'm left with is this kind of cool looking bridge that gets a lot of attention. And this little knob here, you can actually still push that and get a little bit of a dip. So I kind of like that I could just use my palm and smack this thing. I really like to punish my guitars. I think I need to seek help. And then the decal, you might know it from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's what that's from. So yeah, switching between the pickups, even during parts like that, seemed to really have a drastic difference in sound, which I love. Okay, so the last guitar for this episode is my BC Rich Nagel Custom. And I believe it's a one-of-a-kind guitar. It has been customized even further than when I first got it. When I first got this, it had this decal on it with this awesome Nagel model print. And if you don't know who that is, it's an artist that did a lot of stuff in the 80s mostly, I believe. And one of the most popular uses of his artwork is on the cover of a Duran Duran album. So you've probably seen this before. This is not a paint job. There's a long backstory to this. I actually did a podcast with the guy who fixed this up for me. His name's Greg. He's my friend, and he fixes up my guitars and does crazy things to them that I could never do myself. Check this out. One of the most beautiful guitars I own. I know I said that maybe 3 times today, but this one really sticks out. I love how they actually went about fitting the model into this guitar body because it's tough because in the middle of the guitar there's pickups, there's a bridge, so they put her on the outside and kind of had her curl around, like her hair actually swoops around like that. That's really cool. Other guitars that have the Nagel painting usually don't have the neck pickup, and so that's what makes this one a little bit different. I bought this for pretty cheap. Actually, it came from, I believe, Japan, and I bought it during the pandemic, I remember. And it was kind of interesting because when I got it, it felt really beat up and cheap. And it said made in the USA, but it actually wasn't. It was kind of a forgery. It was like a fake. But I knew I wanted to fix it up eventually, so I put brand new pickups in it, or my friend Mike did. And then I had my friend Greg do all the other stuff. So he laminated the body. This artwork was actually just printed on vinyl and then cut to fit the shape of the guitar. So there was like, you know, you could feel where it was coming off a little bit. It was really cheap feeling. The headstock looked horrible. I think I have some pictures of the old headstock, but look at it now. Look at the work Greg did on this thing. He was able to get the actual BC Rich logo in like a gold foil. I put these locking tuners on it. They work pretty well. Even though I've only used this live twice, it stayed in tune the whole time. Greg also put a lot of work into fixing the neck because it felt really stiff. It just felt really hard to bend the strings. It just wasn't very player friendly. But I do like the diamond inlays. I was just going to get a whole new neck, but you know, Greg resurrected this one. So this is the Lazarus of guitar necks, I guess. And I just realized this in the back, there's this little plate that says BC Rich Limited Edition, which is interesting. Maybe it was another forgery, I'm not sure. Usually with flashy guitars like this, I would love to have a trem system where I could do dive bombs and do all the crazy 80s hair metal, but this guitar is not for that. It has a hardtail bridge, and this thing is very secure. So the strings go through the body when you restring it. I never said you could never play hair metal on this guitar, so it's set up perfectly. It's ready for the stage. So front pickup sound. I'm kind of mad at myself that I don't play this thing more often. It mostly just hangs up in the main studio area, and I just love looking at it. It's almost like dating a supermodel, but she's also an astrophysicist. It's like there's more than just looks going on here. We have a very simple configuration. We just have volume and tone. We have a 3-way switch going on, so there's not a whole lot of guesswork going on. It's a pretty basic setup, which I love. Let's try it with clean sound. It's almost made to play that song, isn't it? This is probably another guitar I would rescue if there was ever like a fire because of all the work that my friends put into this thing. Plus, I couldn't let her go up in flames. Come on. What I would love to do at the end of these episodes of the guitar collection videos is have everybody in the comment section say what their favorite guitar was, because it'd be really interesting to me to see, you know, maybe I'll do some sort of hierarchy and say this one ended up being the most popular one. But if you want to vote on it, just go ahead and go to the comment section and say whether you liked, you know, one of the 6 that I showed today. Okay, everyone, thank you for watching my first of 5 or 6 episodes that I'm going to be doing with all my guitars. And hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll see you at the next video. Bye-bye.